Okay, now it's on. Now it says we're live again over on my studio window.
Uh-oh.
Okay, don't press the end button.
All right. Well, we'll see if we're here.
I have no idea. Yeah, it says live
It says we're here. Hey, we're here. It worked.
We're up and running.
The fifth time's a charm.
Is this what happens when you don't read the user's manual?
What's the user's manual?
One.
What is this user's manual of which you
We
speak?
don't even have a quick start guide. We just got a screaming tutorial for Night Strike on a Friday evening, and that's pretty much it. So,
If anybody ever,
That's
I mean,
rude.
not that there was ever a question, but Trish, you're definitely not a man.
I know, that's why I had asked.
I mean, I never questioned that, but at the same time, that's a totally not a man thing to say.
No, I just,
Instruction manual.
men are willing to take the risk to learn by doing, and I appreciate that.
That's right. That's what it is. We're just adventurous.
Hey, John,
Yo,
deselect Jim Burgess because it's set on him.
it's set on him? Where?
Yeah, just click on him and click
Where
off.
is he? He's not even. Oh, there he is.
look at that.
Is that better?
Let's see.
Now how's it look?
Calaveras is getting pretty
Well,
burly
we
there.
gotta wait for the YouTube to catch up. So
Okay, well, I'm. All right. I can't.
Calaveras, for a second, I thought you were Foose.
I don't know
Look at
who you just insulted there.
Dang. Definitely insulted.
Definitely
Foose.
Foose.
Okay, anyway, enough of this. Welcome, everybody. It is a little bit past 9 o'clock now, but it is Tuesday night. It's time for the Get Off My Lawn podcast. So we're very happy to have you, and we're very happy to be here despite our efforts or our issues that we had. Our efforts have been rewarded by a live stream. So here we go. Real quick, again, we started doing this, but it didn't take, so we're going to let everybody introduce themselves for the first time, for the last time, for the first time. So we'll get through this as quickly as we can and get into the discussion. First up, we've got Duke Liberty coming in.
Hey, man, thanks for the invite. Super excited to be here as always. Looks like you got a great panel. I'm excited for the topics.
Glad to have you. Squib, what's up?
Good evening.
Hola. Calaveras, it looks like you're here, but I can't tell if you're actually here, so can you hear me? He might not be here.
Yes,
think
I
he
can
just went
hear.
gray. Calaveras will have to come back in. We'll move to Defense Dad. What's up in the Star City?
Hey, just living the dream, man. Thanks for the invite.
Thanks for coming. All right. You know what? Let's go over to Massachusetts. We've got Charlie from Riding Shotgun with Charlie joining us tonight. What's up?
What is happening, gents? All is well here in the Commonwealth.
All right. We haven't seen his smiling orange face in a while, but we've got Orange Man Good. Obnoxious One is in the house.
Thanks. I like how you made sure to invite me to the For Dummies show.
Yeah, well, you and I talked about that, and as we established, it would really be a shame for you not to be here.
It's expert testimony, right?
That's right.
Exactly.
You're one of our expert witnesses. All right. Pat Hirsch is in the house. What's up, Pat?
Doing good. Out of the planner, finished planning, and just great to be here. Thank you.
Good. Did you get over all your acres or anything too wet?
No, over everything. It's great. It's awesome. It's great. It's awesome. It's a great time.
There we go. All righty. Next up, we've got Patricia Harold from Incendio Firearms Training.
Hi, everybody.
You also
Glad to be
You
here.
also know Trish from the Nebraska Firearms Owners Association. She volunteers with that and every now and then does some sort of board member duties like president. So glad to have you. She only
Thank
runs
you.
the show and makes sure everything happens. That's
Just a
it.
month.
Nothing big. All right. Also coming from the capital city, we've got Travis P11 now.
Yes. This is Travis P11. Check out my YouTube channel, Travis P11. Thank you for the invite, man. I appreciate it.
All right. Now it says 404 not found, but I think we did find you. You're somewhere in parts unknown, also known as Texas. What's up, Mr. Jim?
How's it going, y'all?
Thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for
All
the
right.
invite.
You betcha. All right. And we've got the tactical pickle back. We've got Calaveras 32 Special finally in the house. He's here for real now.
Hey, sorry about that. That's for don't know why my everything cut out. That's right. Killed the camera. See if that helps at all.
Alrighty. Well, it seems to be working, and you're coming in 5x5. And then we also had our tactical chicken sneak in here under the radar. I didn't even see you come in. Gizzard Gary is here with us, guys.
Yeah, I just magically appear sometimes, but hey, thanks for the invite.
The tactical teleporting chicken. There we go.
That's
Give them the
right.
bird. Give them the bird and then teleport back out before they can do anything about it. That's the way to do it.
Right.
The bird is the
All
word.
right. Well, the bird is the word. Okay, so out there in the chat, it was getting kind of filled up already. We've got a lot of people. Who's here? We've got Kingpin was first saying hello to the missus and me. Aaron Mortensen out there. Calaveras 32 Special. Of course, Sandhills Sweetheart is in the chat. She is sitting off the camera in the producer's chair, making sure that nothing falls apart and the wheels stay on the machine tonight. Defense Dad is there and here. Fluffy 10mm Jeep guy is here. Carolina EDC Reviews. Squiblift is in the house. Who else do we have there? We've got Obnoxious Gizzard. We've got Jim out there. Blitz. What's up, Blitz? Squib Load is there. I know there's been more people. Travis showed up. Keith Gregory. If you're watching and you're not commenting, we don't know you're here, and I cannot say hello. So what's up, Rich White? I see you out there. So drop those comments, and we will go from there. So you know what? I think I'm looking at the wrong comments, though. I think I need to go into this one and pop it back out. Hey! Don't worry about me, guys. I'm only a day late and $1 short most of the time. So that was the old chat. That was the one that didn't work, and we had to start it over. So now here's the new one. Who else do we have? We've got Travis, Jim, Carolina, Keith, banging gongs with your moms. We've got Blue Steel 44. We've got Emily L. Hey, Emily, what's up? From I don't know if you're in Texas, but Emily joined us because of that Party Foul Nation chat that we had last week. 10X Shooters in the house. Mystic Guns. Who else do we have? Gun Loving Grandpa. And a few others are showing up as well. So again, get those comments in there so that we can tell you hi. So, all righty. So let's get going here. We're going to have probably more than we can get through in a couple hours time here to talk about. But let me just kind of start this off and say we've got a ton of new gun owners. We keep talking about that, how we've got a whole bunch of new members to the gun owning family or the gun owning community. And so what I want to talk about is the fact that, I mean, it's possible. We've seen this for years, not just with the newbies, but with a lot of people over the years. It's totally possible to own guns and not be pro 2A. It's totally possible to own guns and not be a Second Amendment advocate. And it's definitely possible to own guns and not be a Second Amendment activist. But at the same time, we've got a lot of people now that are realizing that maybe the gun laws in America, and especially in certain states, they're not as lax as what maybe a lot of them thought, especially when they got to the gun stores out in California, because you guys have what, the 10-day wait out there mandatory before you can pick your gun up that you paid for. So
10-day for all firearm types.
So as far as that goes, people are finding out that it's not that easy. You can't leave the gun store because you're mad and go order this thing online and get it shipped to your house. That's not how it works. They're going to ship it right back to that same FFL you just walked out of mad, and then you're still going to have to fill out the paperwork. You're still going to have to wait the 10 days before you go back to get it, but you just took an extra week to get it shipped through the UPS or the FedEx, whatever it is. So you just as well have bought the one that was there, which is dumb. So you know what? Let's just start off with that. That'll be the first law that we talk about. And here's what we're going to do. I've got a list that I kind of put together myself of some of these bigger laws, and they're not necessarily going to be the same, obviously, from state to state. But some of these things are proposed as federal laws, or they are already federal laws. And a lot of these things are laws that we're trying to avoid having to deal with in the future. And so let's just talk about waiting periods, because I know the original idea of the waiting period, it was put into place because whoever the geniuses were that thought this idea up, they thought, well, gosh, if somebody gets mad and there's a heated fight and you're angry with somebody, you may just run right down to the gun store and buy a gun and then take it back and shoot somebody and commit murder. And so the waiting period is designed to be a quote unquote cooling off period. And it's given you the time to stop and rethink those motives to where maybe you'll calm down. Maybe you'll realize that, the fact that your neighbor hasn't mowed his grass, in 3 extra days since you mowed it, and his looks ratty and yours looks beautiful. Maybe that's not actually worth shooting somebody over. Or maybe the fact that 2 spouses were arguing over, how to balance the checkbook and it got really heated. Maybe that's not worth shooting somebody over that kind of a squabble. And that was their idea, and I know they mean well. Most of these laws, believe it or not, were actually made with good intentions in mind, okay? But what about somebody that finds out that they've got a stalker and needs to get a gun right away? Maybe they found out that somebody that they thought was out of their life got out of prison early, and they're not safe. They want to go buy a gun and have that for their own protection. And especially in the state of California, they're looking at a week and a half before is it 10 days or 10 business days, Dale? Do you know?
It is 10 24-hour periods in a row. So if you buy it at 4 p.m., you cannot pick it up until 4:01 p.m. on what would,
on the
after the 20
day.
minutes last. Yeah.
My goodness. Okay. So it's even picky enough about what time of day. That's okay. So what happens in those 10 days in the meantime? Whoever that person is, it just has to live in fear and hope that, if something happens and somebody comes into their house uninvited, that they can get the police there within, 20 seconds or so, which we all know that's not going to happen. So the first problem that I have with such a law is that, number one, again, it doesn't keep somebody safe that actually needs a gun for protection. And number two, there really aren't that many crimes of passion that I've ever heard about where somebody went to the gun store and bought the gun and took it right back and used it to commit a crime. Typically, crimes like that are either premeditated, or if it's a crime of passion, typically it's whatever weapon is close at hand, right? Most crimes of passion, the way I understand it, aren't shootings. They're bludgeonings or they're stabbings because that's what's close by and you're angry enough, or it's bare hands. And then you realize by the time you calm down, my gosh, somebody's dead or close to dead. Then you think it through. But by the time you go to the gun store and get back, you're probably not that mad anyway still. But here's the bigger issue that I have. I already own firearms. Calaveras already owns firearms. Were he, and I know that we're not accusing you. We're not accused. Obviously, this is not an accusation. It's a hypothetical situation. But were Calaveras to get so upset with somebody that he wanted to go pick up a gun and commit a crime with that gun, he's already got access to firearms within his own home. So what does the 10-day waiting period actually accomplish in his case, other than as a deterrent to even buy a gun in the first place? And that is the real evil in such a law, is because they don't keep anybody safe. So tell me another one. The real reason that these laws are in place is because they want to make it as difficult as possible to buy a gun that you'll just decide it's not worth it and you won't buy a gun, and they don't have to outlaw guns if they can make the process to buy such a thing so tedious that it's not even worth trying to buy one to begin with. So it does what they want without having to do what they can't do, I guess is a way to say it. So
are we speaking, sorry, just one quick clarification for myself. Are we talking, about the laws just kind of as they stand normally, or can I get more specific about like what's going on during this whole fiasco right now?
Well, actually, I'm going to turn it over to you here in a second as far as what is going on right now with the fiasco, because again, I don't have any other Californians on the panel. So one of the reasons I asked Calaveras if he was going to be able to make it tonight is because he does live in California and he knows firsthand what's going on right there. But before we let Calaveras go, I I'll just open this up to the rest of the group. Does anybody have anything to say about waiting periods, whether it's a 3-day wait, a 10-day wait, whatever state you're in, whatever the waiting periods are? Does anybody have anything to say about those things that I didn't cover?
Sure. Waiting period.
True.
I was gonna say, here in Nebraska, you've got that waiting period before you get that pistol purchase permit.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
See,
even though it's that first gun, you still got that wait. And now I see you can't stop and fill out the paperwork. You got to print it off and put it in the mail and let that, that just adds a delay. We might have a 7-day waiting period on that first gun in Nebraska for buying a pistol, private or, in a store. So, yeah, I think it's ridiculous.
Well, and in my former state of Illinois, and yes, I pronounce that as Illinois because that's exactly what it is, there used to be a 24-hour wait on long guns and a 3-day wait on pistols, handguns. Now it is a 3-day wait on everything. And just like it is out there for pickle, it is exactly 3 days. It is 24 hours. If you filled out your paperwork and they called in the do the NICS check at 4:01 on Monday, you couldn't pick it up until 4:01 3 days later.
Mm-hmm.
And when I moved down here, and on top of that in Illinois, you have to have your FOID card before you can ever even think about getting a firearm. So you've got a 90 to 120 day wait if you didn't have your FOID card.
Which for those of us who haven't or don't live in or near Illinois, what is the FOID card?
Firearm Owner's ID. It is not a gun registry. It is a gun owner registry.
So they don't care what guns you have. They just want to know that you own them. So if they ever decide they want to take them away, they're going to your house because they know you got it.
Mm-hmm. In most municipalities, they don't care. Some of them actually do have a registration on top of the FOID card.
Gotcha.
So
Chicago being one, of course.
I'm not sure. I know in one of the cities I lived in, they did. And when you bought it there, you had to register it in that city. Guess who didn't buy any other pistols in that city?
No kidding.
So yeah, you've got 190 to 120 day wait just to get your FOID card approved. And I don't imagine they were doing too much of those, when the pandemic hit. And then you've got a 3-day wait for anything that you buy. And then when I moved down here, North Carolina has a pistol purchase permit system. So unless you have your concealed carry license, you can't buy a handgun without a pistol purchase permit or like I said, or your concealed carry permit. And in my county of residence, to get the pistol purchase permit, you had to be a resident for 6 months. So I actually had my concealed carry license before I was actually eligible to even get a pistol purchase permit down here. Now I could have gone and bought a long gun, but you can't buy a handgun without the pistol purchase permit. In North Carolina, 1919 Jim Crow law, still in the books. Get it together, North Carolina. It's 2020.
I'd like to point out a situation in Michigan where you may have to wait. Typically here you don't. There's only one specific situation that I'm aware of, and that is if you are buying a handgun from a private seller and you do not have a CPL, a concealed pistol license, then you have to go down to the police department or sheriff's department, whichever it is for where you're at, and you have to get there's a form you have to fill out. They more or less do a background check on you, and they give you this form, and there's 3 sections. Then you go to the person you're going to buy the handgun from, and you fill it out. They fill it out. You fill it out. They keep a copy. You keep a copy, and another copy you give to that same police department. That's only if you buy a handgun from a private individual and you do not have a CPL. In any other circumstance in this state, there's no wait. You just fill out a 4473 or just do a private transaction. That CPL speeds things up.
And Illinois has basically a universal background check. You, as a private seller, have to see their FOID. You have to call it into the Illinois State Police, and the Illinois State Police give you a proceed or don't proceed. And you still have to wait the 3 days, even from a private seller. North Carolina, private sellers, still need to see your pistol purchase permit or your concealed carry license.
Yeah, here, if you've got the CPL, you just show it to the other person, and you just do a transaction. You're still supposed to register the handgun, but you don't have to go ahead of time and go to the police department and get that paperwork. So that it's a very rare situation. When it used to be that you had to go and do that if you were going to go to a gun show or a gun store first, and they changed it, and now an FFL here in Michigan will do the pistol purchase permit for you. You don't even see it, and they deliver it to the local police for you. So that's, I know for some people it's still an infringement, but I've never had an issue with it, and they've actually made it a lot easier. I'd like to see it all go away, but it's whatever.
Sure. Pat, you had something that you wanted to say.
I'll give you the one side of the having to wait on all that. My wife, before I met her, was a victim of a violent crime, and she'd been around guns and everything before. She knew how to use them and everything, but what in the state that she was at, she didn't bring any of her guns with her. She tried to go out, get a gun, just to protect herself, and I think it was a 3-day waiting period, and the guy that did the assault, and I'm not going to name names or anything like that, but he was still out on the street, and he had already been convicted once of a violent crime, and I think it's got to go right back to the Constitution, where it shall not be infringed. Just go back to the original copy. Because, in a situation like that, where if you need something and you've got to have it now, then why are you infringing on it? So anyway, but that's one side of the coin that I can tell you from what she's told me and everything. It's a little disturbing on that side of it.
Well, yeah, absolutely. All right. Does anybody else, before we go over to Calaveras, does anybody from any of the other states want to jump in on this part?
I just wanted to mention one thing that I found really interesting. We're talking about these delays and waiting periods, and whether you have a permit to purchase or a concealed handgun permit or any of the other licenses. The effect of these laws, these well-intentioned laws, are they really become evident when we have a situation like what's been happening now with COVID. So I work for a small gun club here in the Omaha metro area, and the amount of individuals who are unaware of the permit to purchase requirement, the NICS background check requirement, and all the other requirements for gun ownership, when they were I'll say inspired to become a gun owner because of their concern about their future, their ability to keep themselves and their loved ones safe. There was a tremendous amount of anger, a lot of disappointment, and a lot of fear in these individuals. And it was quite a wake-up call, I think, for many people about how some of these laws, while well-intentioned, really put citizens at risk because of these constraints that they don't really need to have.
Yep, and that's a lot of what we're seeing, I think, out in California right now. So, anybody else want to sound off here before I go to Calaveras? Going once, going twice. The floor is yours, sir. So go ahead and give your opinions overall, and then specifically what's happening lately.
That's where we're lucky enough that we don't have to have a FOID card like in Illinois, and we don't have to have a purchase, permit for handguns. But we do have a 10-day wait, period on all firearm types. If you do a private transaction, it has to go through an FFL. who then does the runs the state and federal checks, and then, as I understand it, they have to hold that firearm for the 10 days, and so the person goes back and picks it up from the FFL. As for what's more specific about right now, because previously, if the FFL didn't get a deny or other during those 10 days, they could at the end of the 10 days they could release it to you. With everything going on, the mass rush of purchases and everything, the state changed the rule so at the end of the 10 days, if they haven't heard anything, you don't get it. So, and with everything going on, that's the worst I've heard of so far has been, I think it was 25 days, wait, for someone to get an answer back from the state level. And then not only with someone mentioned the universal background checks. I guess we kind of already have that because it's whether you're buying from an FFL or private. But on top of that, we also have to do a background check on ammo purchase. So, I don't know how much you want me to extrapolate on that, but
go ahead. Talk about how it affects you, because I know it affects the way you buy ammo.
Right, that's where we can no longer mail order ammo. We cannot legally go to another state, buy ammo, and bring it back with us. If you're from another state, as my understanding is, you got a limited. If you're coming to California to hunt or something like that, my understanding is you are only, you're limited on how much you can bring in. So, like, say if you're going for, I don't know, a deer hunt, which there's a place for that. That's a different story. I think you're limited on how much you can bring in, and then you have to take it all back out with you as well. You can't leave it with a friend or anything like that. If you, that's for, was it 2008, I think, is when the state started their long gun list of, basically anyone that's purchased a long gun since then is on a state list, and handgun has been going back farther than that. So if you go in to purchase ammo, they run your name against that list, and if you're, and you have to have address verification, this kind of stuff, and then you've been approved, on firearms, your name is on that list, then it's it can be a pretty quick, about a 5-minute check. If you haven't, if some of the older generations that they haven't purchased a firearm since those dates because they've already have their collection, then it's an additional background check, additional fee, and additional paperwork they have to do before they can more or less get an approval in order to buy ammo. And only FFLs through their, by having the FFL can legally sell ammo. Other businesses have to get a firearms license dealer, certification. So that's where, like, Walmarts and this kind of stuff don't sell ammo in most places anymore unless they're the only store around. So that's another issue we run into there.
So there's a whole lot of stuff stacking up against everybody that lives in California right now, even more so than usual.
Oh, and that's where they're getting, on top of the whole, licensed ammo dealer. They're looking, right now going through the state legislature, they're trying to pass a precursor parts bill. So that's to buy replacement barrels, to buy replacement bolts, firing pins, this kind of stuff. They would, a seller would have to have a precursor parts dealer license. And there's a bill that goes along with the California micro stamping, on handguns, where they're trying to get it to pass where for every one new handgun added to our roster, 3 old ones have to be removed.
Oh, wow. Just taking a page out of the Trump book. For every new federal law, 2 have to come off, right? So
I have to say, I kind of like that idea where if there's one law or one gun, then 3 guns have to come off. I was just thinking of something. You know what I was thinking? I love how some people say that we need to take the language back. And one of the phrases that I've tried to use is the anti-gun folks like to use the gun show loophole. And when I like to use the phrase the gun control loophole. And gun control loophole is, we don't want gun registration, but we want to know who's got a gun license. Here in Massachusetts, we don't have gun registration. We have transfer registration. And it feels like some stupid, ridiculous Stockholm syndrome sort of a thing where, well, we don't want to know who's got guns. We just want to know who they're going, who's exchanging them or trading them or selling them. And we don't want to know what they have. We just want to know what they're transferring. So if somebody from Free America moved up here, they can have their Free America guns, and they don't have to let Massachusetts know they have them. They have to get a license to have them, but they don't have to let Massachusetts know they have one until they transfer one to me. And then we start a paper trail for that gun. And all this stuff that's going on in California sounds like gun control loophole. And I want to take the language that the anti-gun wackos use and use it against them.
That's a great idea. That's a tremendous idea. And you bring up something else. So let's shift gears now, and we're going to talk about 2 things in succession. And the reason that we're going to do it in this way is because I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. So we're going to talk about universal background checks, and then we're going to talk about gun registrations. Okay. So as we're covering universal background checks, let's not lose sight of that and get into the gun registry part quite yet. Let's stick to the universal background checks first, and then we'll get into gun registry right after that. So again, my own opinion on universal background checks is first of all, they're quite tedious. And just like all of these laws, they only work for the people willing to follow the laws. And I didn't bring that up yet, but everything that we talk about tonight only applies to the law-abiding anyway. Or as Charlie says, the law-abiding background check passing citizens. So anybody who's willing to circumvent the law, there's not a law that works on them because they've already said that or proven that they're not willing to follow the law. So it's just like saying, I've got a teenager who is unwilling to obey the house rules. So I just put 3 more rules on the list of house rules because the teenager won't obey the 10 that are already on there. So 13 rules will make the teenager obey. Well, no, there's no reason why we would think that. So anyway, universal background checks. So what that means is, in a nutshell, and this is something that we're seeing on a federal level that gets proposed about 3 or 4 times a month, it seems like, in a different bill, but they all say the same thing. And I know that they've pretty much just got this template that I think most of them pass around between the House and the Senate, at least on the anti-gun side of things, to where they all kind of use the same language and say the same thing over again. But what a universal background check means basically is anytime you transfer a gun, not just sell a gun. But some of these laws that have been proposed would literally mean if Travis and I decide that we're going to meet up and go to the range and shoot, or I go down to, you didn't plug it, but is it okay to say where you spend some time working, Trish? If I go to a place where I've been before with Sandhills Sweetheart, it's called Omaha Gun Club, and you should look it up if you're in the Omaha area. And we get a lane, and we're shooting at the range. And Trish is there. She's not working, and she says, "Oh, hey, I like the looks of that gun. Can I give that a try?" And I say, "Sure, go ahead." And Trish picks up that gun. We're both felons.
Yeah.
That's exactly how the universal background check laws read. Almost every one of them that has come through in recent, in the last couple of years, has had language that would, in effect, make us both felons for me setting that gun down and Trish picking it up, or me handing it directly to Trish and she pulls the trigger on it. So keep in mind that, again, ideally this was based with good intentions because they don't want the guns going into the wrong hands. Okay. First of all, there's no way to keep that from happening because people break laws. Bad people do bad things. There are so many guns in this country that bad people can get their hands on one if there are other bad people willing to break the law and sell it to them. So that's going to happen regardless of any laws. Okay. But here's the other thing that's going to happen is we can't lend somebody a gun to go take their concealed carry course. And some of the laws that have been proposed, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but the reason I'm saying that is because there have been laws proposed that say you can't buy a gun until you've had this training, but you can't borrow a gun to take the training unless you go down to a dealer and spend the money on a transfer fee so that that gun that is Trish's gun, we have to take it to a dealer and we have to fill out a transfer form, a 4473, so that I can even take possession of this gun that I'm borrowing from her. And then when I'm done with my class and I give it back to her, we've got to go back to the dealer, fill out another form, pay the dealer another fee, and then she retakes possession of her gun that's hers in the first place. She can't lend it to me. We can't just shoot somebody else's gun at the range. If you know somebody who's been in a situation where they were in fear for their safety, they had a stalker, or they live in a bad part of town, or something else has happened, and most of us know people in that position, or people that have been in that position at one time or another. I'm thinking of a family member, and I introduced that person to Trish here a couple years ago because this person was in that same kind of a situation, and Trish was cool enough to give some advice and talk to this person. But if I could have done such a thing, I would have just lent that family member a gun and said, here, keep this in the house. Here's how it works. Let's go find some time to go, get you familiar with it at the range. And then you keep this at your house until you feel safe. Under a universal background check law, that would be highly illegal. Again, we couldn't do that without having to spend the time to basically retitle it. It would be like retitling a car every time that you switch drivers. That's exactly what it would be like. So, go ahead.
Gun control loophole. This is the nonsense that they have, and
we're not trying to take away your guns.
Right, exactly. And I've had when all of this, honestly, just before this happened, I had someone that I work with contact me and say, hey, listen, you know what? Things are looking really weird and strange and crazy, and I want to learn how to shoot a gun. I'm like, okay, that sounds cool, man. Let's go shooting. I'll teach you how to shoot. And this guy is I hate to stereotype, but he's a musician and he's a lefty, and I said, I'll take you shooting. And he's like, well, we don't agree on anything. And I'm like, that's okay. I agree on the fact that you're concerned about things and you want to protect yourself, and that's cool. And I get it. We don't have to agree on anything. And you might not think that people should have assault weapons and ARs and all this sort of stuff. But I think you should be able to protect yourself, and you want to be able to protect yourself. And that's what I'm going to show you how to use a gun. And I don't care, as long as you're not doing it for using it for any reason illegally, it's not my responsibility. And it's and then when you start to say, well, if I can I borrow a gun? No. In Massachusetts, I can't give you a gun if you don't have a gun license. And if I give it to you, if, like you said, if we have universal background checks, I have to do a background check on you to let you borrow my gun, and you get to use it. And I did this with a friend of mine. I let him borrow one of my guns for teaching some courses. And then I said, and I use this as an example when I teach classes. I let you borrow my gun. I have to do a background check on you, and you've got a gun license, which means you've already passed background checks. And then I take the gun back from you, which means you give me my gun, and you have to do a background check on me. And this is completely ridiculous. And I've expressed this honestly. This was the week after Vegas happened. I was talking to one of my friends, and I spent 10 years playing in a band with this guy, and we traveled up and down the East Coast. We shared hotel rooms as we were traveling, and airplane trips, and we've been all over the place together. We haven't talked since we had this conversation, but he hasn't had to pass a background check. He was talking about universal background checks, and I'm like, the universal background checks are BS. They're nonsense. They're ridiculous. They're stupid. And he says, well, what if somebody had a gun license and they've committed a crime since when you sold them a gun? And I'm like, well, if they've committed a crime, then they would have been prosecuted and their gun license would have been taken. And they wouldn't have a gun license, and therefore they wouldn't pass a background check. But if they have a gun license, they haven't gotten themselves in trouble. And I asked him, I said, so how many background checks have you passed? And he's like, I've never passed a background check. And I said, okay, you could be a criminal. I pass it every 5 years for my Utah license. I pass it every 3 years for my Utah instructor license, and I pass it every 6 years for my Massachusetts license. So I'm saying every 2 years, 2 to 3 years, I'm going through a background check for something, and you haven't been through any. You're probably a criminal. And I hung up on him. And honestly, we haven't talked since then because there's a little bit of gun shaming with all of this nonsense where you're trying to make me feel bad because people should pass background checks. But if I've got a gun license, I've already passed 2 background checks in my state in order to get a gun license. And that's where I'm at.
Yes, I agree. Now, again, before we go any further, again, it's important that anybody who's listening, especially those of you who are listening who haven't been around the gun community or the gun owner community for very long or your whole life or for any period of time. And again, there are some people that maybe will hear this that still maybe don't agree necessarily with everything we agree with or everything that we think as far as, these freedoms are very important to us and why they're important. And there's a huge number of people, and I don't know percentage-wise, but I know there's a large number of people in this country who still think that we are more concerned with having our toys than we are with keeping children alive, and that we would rather see babies die than give up our toys or give up our guns. And I want to just stop right now and say that is 100% false. That is not true. And the reason that we're so adamant about holding on to our guns and holding on to our freedoms is not because we want to see anybody die, but it's because we want to see everybody have the best chance to keep themselves and their loved ones from dying. And I think it's important that we establish that even the pro-gun community, even though we do like these tools that are, they have capacity to be very destructive. So does a hammer. Okay. So does any other tool if used incorrectly. And that goes back to responsibility. If the tool is used responsibly, then you don't have to worry about bad things being done intentionally with it. So the reason we're so adamant about holding on to these tools is because some of these tools are the best tool for the job of protecting ourselves, of protecting our loved ones, of protecting our families. And we don't want to see those tools taken away from us. Because then how many more babies are going to die when there's nobody left to be able to protect themselves? And so that is why even the universal background checks, they can be such a terrible thing because, again, if somebody needs to borrow a gun from a neighbor, a friend, a relative, even for a short period of time, and they are not a prohibited person, which if anybody doesn't know who is prohibited from owning a firearm, then you didn't just buy one. That's for sure, because it's on the list on the 4473 that you're required to fill out. Okay. All of those check boxes are things that would prohibit you from being able to purchase that gun if you checked the wrong box. Lying on that and falsely checking a box would also prohibit you from owning the gun if you get caught doing it. So keep that in mind as well. Okay, so universal background checks, number one, for all of the reasons just listed, can do way more harm than they do good. They don't do good. They don't do anything. Okay, before we cover gun registrations, does anybody else have anything they want to throw out there as far as universal background checks go?
I just wanted to, since Defense Dad is a relatively new shooter to all this and getting started up on everything, I wanted to get a kind of look into a newer shooter's eyes on what they think of all this. So if you'd want to chime in, Defense Dad, that'd be great.
Sure. The subject of universal background checks. I mean, I'm gonna try really not to lose my temper about it because.
Thank you.
So, just so people know, like I'm newer to owning firearms, but I grew up shooting. I just never purchased one until the last few years. But these universal background checks would go against exactly the whole reason I decided to purchase mine is, So a couple months ago when I testified down at the downtown Lincoln, the anti-gun groups like Moms Demand Action. I don't know which group for sure that these people were from, but on my way in to testify, lady just screamed at me, "Why do you want to kill babies?" And I did not have the time to tell her, but I was like, "Lady, the whole reason I decided to finally purchase a firearm in the first place is there was 2 kidnapping attempts within a mile and a half of my home." And I was like, okay, this is getting out of hand. It's finally time to have one. That if they pass all this crap, it would make me harder. It would make it harder for me to protect my daughter, which is the entire reason I purchased it in the first place. So yeah, I am totally against them. And to the point where is these legislations, are they good for people? Or excuse me, not good for people? Are they presented for the most part with good intentions? I think somewhat, but I'm just going to call out the elephant in the room. A lot of these, whether it's universal background check or these new firearms laws that get proposed, are just the people trying to get their names attached to a bill so they can keep their eye out in the public so they can get reelected. That's just my opinion of it. Is that, again, I'm trying to not to get too heated about it, but I guess that's my opinion on that.
And not only that, but also it gives the impression that they're doing something. We've got people getting shot at concerts and in schools. You guys need to do something. Well, we're doing something.
You know what I love? Again, going back to using the language, people like to say, well, we're doing something, and the something isn't working. So I like to say, well, let's do something else.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do something else. If putting more restrictions on magazine capacity, rifle styles, cosmetic features, transfers, all licenses, extra licenses, super extra licenses. If all that nonsense doesn't work, let's do something else. If you want to carry a gun, carry a gun. If you want to get a gun, get a gun license.
Something doesn't matter unless you diagnose the problem and do the right something. I mean, I've said many times, if I get carried or hobble into the emergency room with a broken leg, I don't want somebody just to do something and intubate me or shock me with the paddles because my leg is broken. But they're doing something, they're trying to save my life. Well, but they're going to hurt me in the process because they're not doing the right something.
Absolutely. And the stuff that they're doing is not really working. I mean, again, going back to all the stuff they have, well, the gun-free zones and put up the gun-free signs and all this nonsense gets us absolutely nowhere. Let's do something else. Let's say, hey, listen, and I've been a teacher for 25 years. I've taught in public and private schools. I got into gun stuff because on September 11th or after September 11th, they said, hey, listen, if somebody's in the school that shouldn't be here, we're going to say the eagle has landed, lock the doors, hide under the desks. And I said, that's a bunch of baloney. You go back to talking with the defensive dad and stuff. I carry a gun to protect my kids. And to me, the ultimate expression of my love, and I sound hokey and strange when I say that, but to me, carrying a gun is telling my kids, I love you so much that if someone harms you, I will kill them for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how far I will go. I would rather you come visit me on Saturdays during visiting hours than to come to my gravesite because I didn't do anything. So we've got to do something else, and this something else, and coming up with these laws, it doesn't work. And Joe Biden's, I hate to pick on Joe Biden, of course, because whatever. But Joe Biden's come out and said, "Hey, listen, the 22,000 gun laws that we have aren't working. We need more gun laws," which brings it right back to what you brought up at the beginning, John. I told my kid 10 times don't do this. I'm going to tell him 13 times not do this. This is nonsense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's.
Hey, John.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to add to all this, I think one of the most powerful things that Charlie is saying, and you're saying, and so many others are saying, the do something else. That's just so powerful, because as a gun lobbyist in Nebraska, and to defense Dad, that was probably the Nebraskans Against Violence who yelled at you about killing babies. The first time I ever testified in the unicameral, I got told by their leader I had blood on my hands, and fascinating. Anyway, lovely lady. So let's talk about root cause analysis. We're all here because we want to protect ourselves, defend ourselves, keep our families safe and our community safe. And the approach that the gun lobby and the senators who want to stay elected and get their name out is to try to pass laws that often have no good effect, right? They don't have a measurable impact on reducing the violent use of a firearm. They just inhibit the lawful use of a firearm. And I read a recent news article that came out of all places, the Giffords Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence. I love to read all sources of information and try to keep my bias down. And they had done a study in Oakland, California, and I was raised in the Bay Area of California. And so I grew up in a place where violence was definitely far more outspread than what we see even here in Omaha. And they were documenting how they had this significant reduction in violence in this community. And I was like, oh, I want to know what laws they're going to say helped them achieve that statistical huge reduction. And you know what was funny? In the entire article, there wasn't one piece of legislation or an ordinance or restriction on firearm ownership, possession, transportation, or transfer. It was literally a community outreach approach to educate and teach children and parents and families and communities how to handle challenging times, both for socio and economic situations, problem solving, anger management, all these wonderful things that equip human beings to handle stress and handle conflict. And in that community, they had a significant change, not only in the regular populace, but within the gang communities in Oakland, California. When I grew up, you didn't go to Oakland at night. I don't know how it is now. It might be worse. But literally, yeah, you could go there during the day, but you wouldn't go there at night. And it was so significant coming out of that Giffords Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence that they were actually promoting it. Because to me, it was like, well, here, this is what we've been saying so long. Go to the root cause. Violence has existed in humanity since the beginning of time, but there are ways to provide people different options than violence, whether it's with a gun or without.
Educate, not legislate.
Exactly. DC Project all the way.
All right. So, okay. Does anybody else have anything that they want to mention on the universal background checks before I expose the biggest hole in the whole theory?
Universal background checks suck.
That's very true. Also, they're worthless. They're completely worthless because here's what's going to happen. If we just have a universal background check, let's go back to that lane at the range inside Omaha Gun Club, and Trish and Sandhills Sweetheart and I are hanging out there, having a good time, just putting rounds down range. And let's say that a police officer walks in, wants to spot check us, and says, Trish, this gun that you're shooting right now, does that belong to you? And Trish says, why, yes, it does. And the officer has no choice but to say, okay, I just wanted to know, have a good day. And he walks out the door because he has no way to verify that. or she. We don't have to be sexist with our officers, but the police officer has no way to verify if that's actually Trish's gun. It could very well be my gun that she is using. It could be Sandhills Sweetheart's gun that Trish is using. It could be one that is a rental from the range itself, but the point is that there's no way to verify that. There is no way to enforce a universal background check because all we have to do is say, yes, I've owned this for a long time. Unless there is, to go with it, a registry so they know who has what. So let's segue now over to the gun registries. And somebody is going to have to help me out because I didn't think until we were already live. I should have researched this. But it is my understanding that we have a law in place in this country that outlaws gun registrations. Is that correct? Can anybody back me up on that?
At the federal level.
Okay.
Yeah.
At the federal level. Yes. Which should actually blanket every jurisdiction. But at any rate,
If that
we do
was
have...
the case, then the state gun laws would have to go away because they violate the Second Amendment, which is at the federal
you're right.
level.
Which is what we would all love SCOTUS to just rule, but that's probably never going to happen. So anyway, yes,
That's
at the federal level...
If I may.
Go ahead.
Yeah, talking about at the federal level, that's where last chat I was on, I haven't seen it, so I can't verify 100%. Talking with Glemtech Arms out of, because he's an FFL in Arizona. The new version of the 4473 will have the serial number of the firearm, the make, model, and everything along, on the front page, on the first page, along with the purchaser's information. So although they are not supposed to, if they come in to check in FFL's books, are not supposed to take images of those, scans or anything else. But by putting all that on the front page, there is the chance, exactly, of if a ATF agent is left alone for any length of time with a FFL's books, they could start, snapping photos of that information and making a under-the-table registration at the federal level.
It's been a long time since I spoke to anybody that doesn't carry a camera in their pocket. So, plus that's what I do for a living, is sell those devices. Anyway, yeah, you're very much right there. So let's talk about gun registrations and why we oppose those as well. And why is there a federal law prohibiting a nationwide gun registration in the first place? Does anybody want to expound on that one for me?
Yeah, I'll go for that one. Sure. As far as the registration goes, it's like an open book to anybody that wants to look and go like, oh, hey, this guy's got guns. I can go there, rob him, take his guns, sell them on the black market, especially if it's, public record, where anybody can see any of that stuff, which some of that stuff has leaked out from time to time. So that's my main concern, is that information getting out, especially if everybody has to do registration. And at that time, I'm just gonna, But anyway,
and even if it's not public record, data breaches never happen, right?
Exactly. Well, just like every other week, credit cards.
Is there anybody listening to my voice right now that at some point in their life didn't have to get a different debit card or credit card because there was a data breach in the bank's records or Visa's records or somewhere, and they just issued you a new card because that was the most secure way to do it? We've all been there. We've all faced such a thing and had to, go back and activate a new card and get our PIN set back up and everything like that. It's a pain in the neck because somebody was snooping around where they shouldn't, and they got past a firewall that wasn't supposed to let them through it. So we know what happens. In the private sense, we have a potential for bad actors to just go and know exactly which houses to rob, right? Although at the same time, if I know a house has guns in it, I'm probably going to case that joint very, very well if I'm a criminal, because I don't just want to go waltzing into a house that I know there's guns in and expect that not to end badly. It is kind of a two-edged sword there in a way. But the bigger concern that I have is if we look back in history, I have not yet found an instance where a nation had a nationwide gun registry, that at some point the government did not use that to disarm its citizens. And the fact that our citizens are not supposed to get disarmed is one of the founding principles of our nation. That is the cause of the shot heard around the world back in April 1775, was because the government tried to disarm the citizens and confiscate their armory. And so the simple notion that the government knows who owns guns and which guns they own also would eliminate the tragic boating accident, because there's been a couple years ago we started hearing about things like, oh, I lost mine in a tragic boating accident and I'm not going to register it. Well, enough people said that to where the law proposers wised up, and now these laws include language that say if you lose it, you have only got 24 hours or 48 hours to report it missing or stolen, or else you also become a criminal again, in which would prohibit you from owning the rest of your firearms. So if you lost it in a tragic boating accident, then you would have to report it stolen or missing. And then later on, if you turn up with that in your hands, then you've got some more explaining to do, because I thought you lost that one. Why do you still have it? Did you lie to us before? You're a criminal. Give us all your guns. You're going to jail. You can never have a gun again.
Evan Knappen is a great pro-gun attorney in New Jersey who lives in New Hampshire, I believe, and he's got a lot of books out, and he's been involved in a lot of cases. Brian Aiken and Shanine Allen and a number of other ones. But he has a great saying, and the saying is, legislation leads to registration, registration leads to confiscation, and confiscation leads to extermination.
Those are very powerful statements.
Absolutely, and you can totally see the progression of how this stuff works. Back to the boating stuff that you're talking about. We all thought it was cool and funny when someone said, "Oh, I lost all my guns in a boating accident." I saw somebody that put something up that said, the fact that you're lying about a boating accident probably means it's time to pull those things out, and it's time that we need them. I've got something that I've been saying this to a couple of people, that it's the whole, our founding fathers would be shooting by now because they were fighting for a 3% tax over tea. And our taxes are 35 to 50% of what we make now for most Americans. So I like to say this. I like to say our founding fathers would be reloading by now.
That's probably true too.
They would be shooting twice. God damn it! And this is complete, like. In Massachusetts, again, I mean, I hate to talk about our state. It's not a great example, but it's a great example of all of the ridiculousness that are the gun laws. We don't have gun registration. We have transfer registration. So you guys in free America can move here with your free America guns, and you don't have to let Massachusetts know you have them. God forbid you walk under a ladder and you have to live here for 7 years. You have to get a license to have them, but you don't have to get a license. You don't have to let Massachusetts know you have those until you transfer them to me. And you could move here and you could live here for 30 years and get your gun license and pay your $100 every 6 years and not have any issues or problems with it, and then move back to free America, and Massachusetts doesn't know what you have until you transfer it to someone else. And the Massachusetts laws are so convoluted. We can't buy guns. There are guns that we cannot buy from dealers. We can't buy Gen 5 Glocks from dealers. We can't buy Kimbers from dealers. But we can buy them from private individuals, which is completely ridiculous that we can buy them from one place and not from another. And this is, I mean, our country has become such a patchwork of stupid, ridiculous gun laws. Ugh. All right, I'm done.
Well, and that's one that we probably won't get time to cover tonight, but just the very fact that we have such a patchwork of laws, and if you do any kind of travel at all, you've really got to be on your toes with your homework to know what laws you need to be in compliance with, just from not even from state to state only, but from county to county, from city to city. So, I'd love to take a trip sometime and go to the eastern part of the U.S. and see a lot of the sites. Go to Washington and see all the sites, and I'd love to go up through New England once to say that I've been up through there, and great place to visit. Probably don't want to live there, but at the same time, I don't want to go unarmed. I don't want to go completely. I don't want to be unsafe, but I also don't want to violate any laws. And we've got some things, speaking of patchworks and whatnot, let's talk about mag capacity limits, because those vary from state to state and from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So we've already got handguns in our collection that I can't take to Colorado, which, Nebraska shares a border with, and my company is headquartered in Colorado. So there are times that I go out there. Now, luckily, there are no company policies against firearms in private vehicles, and I don't have a company vehicle, so I can take firearms in my vehicle and have them secured in my hotel room, whatever, and be safe, on the road and in the room and whatnot, without violating my company's policies. But again, I've got to remember what the Colorado state laws are for magazine capacities, because I believe it's 15. So if you've got a firearm that holds 16 or more in the magazine, then those magazines are the firearm's okay, but the magazines are illegal in the state of Colorado. So I've got to make sure that certain things stay home. Certain things can't go with me across that state line. If I were to go to New Jersey or New York, I think it's, what is it now, 7? In those states, or one or the other of those states, I think has a 7-round ban, right? Or a 7-round limit.
I think New York is 7 and New Jersey is 10.
Okay. So what makes a 7-round magazine that much more safe? I know New Jersey, I can't talk either. Speaking of Freudian slips, just to go back to what Charlie was saying, it is very possible, if you've been around livestock, you can lose your buns in a tragic goading accident as well. That can happen. So anyway, New Jersey and New York, I know that in many places you just cross a bridge and you've crossed the state line. And so what makes it safe for me to have 3 extra rounds in my magazine on one side of a river but not on the other? It's completely arbitrary. It's a number that was just snatched out of midair. It doesn't mean anything. The gun doesn't get any deadlier. The gun doesn't get any shootier, because maybe I can pull the trigger 3 extra times before I have to reload that magazine. Now, again, good intentions. I know the thought process originally was because they don't want people to be able to go on a spree shooting and be able to pull that trigger 30 or 50 or 100 times without having to reload, because somehow that 2 seconds that it takes, and trust me, 2 seconds is a long time on a reload. You don't have to practice much to do a 2-second mag reload if you know what you're doing and you're familiar with your gun. I know competitors do it in half a second or less. I can't even track their hands watching competitions on TV when they're doing reloads. So I know that, a 2 Mississippi count, I can reload in 2 Mississippi. So it doesn't really matter to me how many times I have to do that. It's 2 seconds. If I were to do something bad, I just can't see how that extra second or 2 makes a whole lot of difference in the great scheme of things. But again, it makes people feel good about themselves, and it makes them feel like they've done something. And it also makes it to where sometimes overnight, people that owned a 10-round magazine overnight became a felon because now they own that 10-round magazine. So again, it's completely arbitrary. Go ahead.
Speaking of patchwork, that's where, how about bad enough with round count limits, but there are some states, I want to say New Jersey is one of them, where ammo type restrictions. That's where where one state you can carry one kind of ammo, another state, if you happen to wander into that state, now the type of ammo you have on you is a felony.
I think with New Jersey, it's like
with that case with the lady who drove through Maryland, and she was concealed carrying a firearm, a loaded firearm. she wasn't transporting it under FOPA. I think there's the.
Yeah, I was gonna say we have FOPA in place.
Okay, there are some states where you can't open or conceal carry in a vehicle, or just like, you know, in your state, you can have a loaded AR in the back seat, and I can't. That doesn't mean you can't bring an AR-15 into Michigan. It just has to be in a case. That's all. And if you were traveling through different states, FOPA is supposed to protect you. I know some states don't honor that, but there are certain states like New Jersey, Massachusetts, Maryland, New York, California. I wouldn't go shooting there. I wouldn't bring a gun there. And because they're on the coast, they're at kind of like at, you know, any further than you're in the water. I wouldn't even have a reason to drive through them to get to another state. So there's some stuff about, I know some people, it's like, oh, I can't bring my gun with me. It's the end of the world. I won't go there. All right, then dude, don't go there. But when I'm on vacation, you know, I've gone to some of these really restrictive states. I don't bring any firearms with. It's not that big of a deal. I went to the Trinity site at White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico. They open it twice a year. And it says you can't bring any firearms with you onto the base. Now, they've got a checkpoint, and they have the right to stop you and search you at any point. Now, they didn't. Lots of people go there. They've been doing this for decades. You drive on, you go walk around, you know, you look for little green stones, you drive off. That's it. Okay? But I was actually going to purchase some firearms while I was out west and bring them back to Michigan. And I said, nope, I'm not going to do it because I'm driving on this Army base, and they have the right to stop me if they want it. And, you know, so you have to make a decision. Do you want to transport? I had somebody, when I went out to Travis's, somebody said, oh, you've got to find a way to drive around Illinois because you can't drive through Illinois with your guns. And I was like, whatever, and drove right through Illinois. You know, so I think it's a matter of knowing some of the laws and making a decision. Am I going to conceal carry or have a loaded gun in the vehicle, in the glove box, or whatever the state law is? Or am I just going to transport them because I'm going through this state to go somewhere else? Or, you know, do I really need to bring my gun with me? If it's that important to you, I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't have the right. We should all have the right, but we can't just snap our fingers and change these state laws. You have to make a decision.
Right. Well, and I've been there too. I've made trips out to California with work, and I've made trips out of the country, and I don't like it. I think it sucks that I have to disarm, but I still go. I just don't feel safe anymore. It's one of those things where I never thought much about it until I started carrying a firearm concealed. And now that I do that everywhere that I legally can, the places that I legally can't, I feel naked. And am I likely to get into trouble? Am I likely to get shot? Probably not. No. But at the same time, you know, once you get used to that, that feeling of security, you know, of being kind of more in control of your own safety and well-being, to have to turn around and place responsibility for your safety and well-being and your families into the hands of somebody else, again, it's just not what I like to do. So there are times that I decide not to go into places because I don't want to disarm. There are other times that I decide that I'm still going to go to the place, and then I disarm and I follow the laws.
So I hear that all the time. I had a concealed carry permit for 10 years, and I open carry from time to time. And before I had a concealed carry permit, I never concealed carry. Since my concealed carry permit has expired, I don't conceal carry. I don't always open carry everywhere that I can. For me, it's just like an on-off switch. And some people are like, no, I can't leave the house without my gun. And it makes us all kind of sound a little, you know, whatever. But the whole thing is, it is still a choice. If you say, it's just like when I went to a gun range recently, and they said, you got to wear a mask in here. And I walked out. On principle, I said, I don't want to be in here if I got to wear their stupid mask. So it is a choice. And I'm not saying that I agree with these laws, but you've got to make a decision. I mean, how many people can still carry when they go to the post office? Do they ever get caught? No. Are you allowed to? No, you're not. It happens every day. Maybe you don't think about it, or maybe you go, and you know, I'll deal with it in the courts if I have to. If there's a shooting in the post office and I got to defend myself, you know, it's a choice. I don't twist somebody's arm and say you have to own a gun, you have to conceal carry, you have to take it with you everywhere you go. But for some people, it's just like, get the laws changed, otherwise make a decision, because it's really, just think about what did you do before you ever even owned a gun that you could carry with you, a handgun? What did you do before you had a concealed carry? Well, you went everywhere. Okay, so what's the difference?
Yep, and I didn't think about it.
Right. So
and I
that's
didn't think
why
about it. But now that
on and off like a switch,
no, you're
because
right.
I used to do it.
You're right.
So.
Now going back to magazine capacity limits, I just, again, for those of you who may still kind of be wondering, why is this such a big deal? It's not the biggest of the big deals, but again, it's just another thing that people try to erode our constitutionally protected freedoms. And so let me put it to you this way. Let's say that your state starts out, you have, no limits on magazine capacity. I live in a state like that, thank God, for now anyway. But we don't have any restrictions right now on magazine capacity. So if I want to go buy a 150 round drum magazine for my AR-15, then I can still legally own that in my state. And if I want to spend that kind of money, and right now it's very expensive to load 150 rounds into a magazine. So, but if I wanted to do it, I could. But let's say that they passed a law and said, okay, well, now we're going to restrict magazine capacities to only 30 round magazines. Okay. Or, 30 rounds or less. So all of a sudden that drum magazine, those aren't cheap. They cost over $100 a piece. I got to figure out how to get rid of that. I can't sell it to anybody, give it away, ship it out of state. I've either got to bust it or give it to the cops, and they're not going to pay me back for it. So first of all, we've got that happening. The next thing is, okay, and again, I know these are hypotheticals, and I know the likelihood of these things happening in this order, I know it's slim, but you cannot say it's impossible. It becomes plausible. So just go with me here. Let's say that somebody does something bad. They take an AK-47 pattern type rifle with 30 round magazines, and they go to a public place and they use that gun with the 30 round magazines to murder a bunch of innocent people. So then the state decides, okay, so the 30 round magazine, let this person kill a whole bunch of people indiscriminately in a short amount of time. So let's limit these to 20 round magazines. So then now we're down to 20 rounds. And then another spree shooting happens because people can still change magazines fairly quickly, like we just established. So then we're going to say, okay, so the 20 round magazine limit didn't do anything. So now let's limit everybody down to 15 rounds or 10 rounds or 7 rounds. Pretty soon we're down to single shot firearms, and people still would get murdered with such a thing. And then what's the next step? Well, now we can't have firearms because nothing has worked so far to stop people from breaking the law. So another law. And again, that's the progression. And the magazine capacity limit is a thorn in the side for most gun owners. It's very rarely does it actually create a whole lot of legal trouble, especially for the people that have done their homework. But it does happen. We all have seen headlines where people got caught in the wrong state at the wrong time with the wrong magazine. We know it happens. But again, it's very indicative and symbolic of all of these things that happen because we restrict things a little bit. It doesn't work. We restrict things a little bit more. It doesn't work. We restrict things even more, and it doesn't work. And so we just keep, the government keeps tightening the grip and tightening the grip and tightening the grip until all of a sudden we don't have anything left other than, things that they've taken away. It doesn't happen overnight, but we lose and 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 we lose little things at a time until one day we look back and realize, gosh, we used to have a lot of freedoms. Where did all those go? How did this happen? And so, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I was waiting for a good time. The magazine capacity is like the old joke about the Jewish father, and nothing against Jewish fathers, certainly. But the joke is this: the teenage boy goes to his dad and says, "Dad, Jewish teenager goes to his father and says, Dad, I need $50. I have a date this weekend." And the dad says, $50? What do you need $40 for? I can't afford to give you $30. Here's $20 and bring me $10 in change. It's completely that. Well, 30's too many. Well, 20's too many. No, 15's too many. 10's too many. Though, you talked about New York earlier. When New York dropped down to the 7 rounds in a magazine, it was 7 rounds in a magazine. It wasn't a 7-round magazine. You can have a 10-round magazine, but it can only have 7 rounds in it. and for 24 hours until in New York, they were wise enough to realize that having the police having 10-round magazines or having magazines with more than 10 rounds made them illegal. Then they spent like 24 hours breaking the law themselves, because they're like, whoa, wait a second, 7 rounds is only for the people, not for the law, not for the police. It's completely ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous. Swen-Lee Cho in the Virginia Tech shooting carried a Walther P22, which only has 10-round magazines, and he carried a Glock 19 with 10-round magazines as well. He killed 32 people. And you talked about changing magazines. One of our famous politicians who may be running for office said it takes about 2 minutes to change a magazine. Dude, Joe Biden's been around since the Revolutionary War times, where it took 2 minutes to reload a gun.
It doesn't even take 2 minutes to reload that double-barrel shotgun he wants us all to
Maybe
own.
a California-compliant AR, possibly, but I don't know of anything else that requires. Sorry, Calvis.
Yeah, only if you're going to feed the rounds one by one through the ejection port into your magazine.
Yeah.
Right. It's one of these, like here in Massachusetts, one of the things they proposed is they proposed, oh my God, what was an 8-hour class with a 50 rounds of ammunition in an 8-hour class. And I tell people, I'm like, so 50 rounds, what do you do for the next 7 hours and 40 minutes? Because you can go through 50 rounds in 20 minutes. Even as an instructor. I mean,
you learn how to load that musket. They're going to make you shoot in 10 years. You learn how to musket carry.
Now,
God, that's hilarious.
Just to prove a point here, too, I'm going to risk a channel strike. This is not a firearm. This is an airsoft gun with the orange muzzle. Okay, this is not a firearm. It's just the little plastic BBs. It's got the little magazine in it, that loads the same way, and this has the paddle release. But if I hit the magazine release and that drops free, and I take the new one and I put it in there, it doesn't take long, and that was not a speed reload. It's just silly to think that lowering the capacity of a magazine is going to slow anybody down that actually knows what they're doing.
Sandhills, it sounds like you're pleading your case to these new gun owners that have always thought that this stuff makes sense, and now that they own a gun, they're going to change their mind. I think they're still going to, everything you're saying, they're just nodding their head going, yeah, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. It doesn't mean
that's possible.
anything. It doesn't.
That's totally possible.
I don't know if that was the whole point of what you were saying. Was because everybody here, we all know this stuff. We've lived it. But for certain people with a certain, the government will take care of me kind of thing that will always feel that way. They're going, yeah. What about what you're saying is wrong? That makes sense. That makes sense. It's just somebody's perception. They think those restrictions are okay. Maybe if you found something that they cared about that you restricted, they'd go, oh, no, that's not cool. Well, then why is it cool to restrict somebody's Second Amendment right? Well, because,
Well, and that's exactly right. And you're right. There may be people that listen to this that still think that gun laws are okay because we still don't want the bad people. We want the laws for the bad people. And you know what? I'm okay if I never change a mind that's already set like that. That's okay. But I'm planting the seed, maybe, or maybe I've got somebody out there listening right now that is hasn't really thought about any of this stuff until recently because they just bought a gun and found out it's not as easy as Barack Obama said it was. And so maybe they're starting to question everything else that they were told about guns and that they just believed about guns because they didn't have any experience to refute that until now. So maybe we can get even one person to decide that, maybe some of these laws really don't make any sense. And then maybe they'll tell one other person. And we still can get this dialogue going. It may be slow, but we still have a chance to do so. And that's why I wanted to talk about these things tonight. But I don't remember now. There's been a lot of stuff has been thrown out here in the last couple of minutes. But when we go back to, as far as our rights and things like that, things that are guaranteed by the Constitution, let's throw this next one out here. What about age limits? Certain states, mine is one of them, you have to be 21 years old to purchase a handgun. You have to be 21 years old to purchase handgun ammunition. At age 18, you can buy a long gun and long gun ammunition. We do have laws, again, proposed federally that would raise the buying age to 21 for all firearms. We just had one that was heard in judiciary here back in, I think, February in our state that would have raised the purchase age to 21, but on all firearms, but not the age to own it. So you can't buy it from the store, but if I buy it and then I gift it to you and you're not prohibited and you're 19, that's okay. So, I mean, that solved a problem we don't even have. So, I mean, again, the biggest question I have with age limits and age restrictions on firearms. Now, I understand we don't want to just give, a semi-automatic rifle to a 5-year-old and say, "Okay, little Timmy, go run amok."
Come on,
nobody's proposing
that all the time, man.
Well, you're right, they do, but they also teach them. They cut their teeth on that rifle stock though first.
Yeah,
but they do teach little Timmy how to use that gun safely and responsibly, right? So if little Timmy knows how to use a gun safely and responsibly, I don't have a problem with little Timmy having one. That's just how I feel. The question that I have, though, and again, everything that I'm saying is on the premise that we are using these tools responsibly and we're not misusing any of these tools. Okay, everything that I've said tonight and everything I'm going to say forever is on the premise that we're going to responsibly use our tools. Okay. But as far as age restrictions go, is there an age restriction on the right to free speech? And I'm not talking about you're not allowed to say that word in my house, young man. I'm talking about federally. Can you be locked up if you're 5 years old and you drop an F-bomb? No. If you're 5 years old, does that mean that the military can come in and take over your bedroom, no other part of the house, but the 5-year-old's bedroom? Soldiers can sleep in that bedroom if we're not at war? No. You still have your constitutionally protected freedoms no matter how old you are. So how is the Second Amendment a second-rate freedom? It's not. And that, again, goes back to, yes, we need to be responsible with our tools, but if used responsibly, they don't hurt people. Yes, there are accidents, but if used responsibly, these tools don't hurt people, especially not intentionally. And so at that rate, then why is it bad for a 16-year-old to be able to go in and buy ammo, buy a long gun, things like that? What would be wrong with it? What would be wrong with a 19-year-old who moved out of the house, doesn't live at home, maybe is going to college and lives off campus, but can't have a firearm, a handgun for their personal protection when they're not on campus? What sense does that make? It doesn't make any sense to me. So we don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but as far as age limits go, is there anything that I'm not thinking of here? Does anybody have anything else they want to kick in on the age limit part?
When I was
19, the United States federal government taught me how to use a rifle, a handgun, a machine gun, a grenade launcher, an anti-tank weapon, a minigun. Yeah, we did knife fight too. Yeah, bayonet. So if they gave me all that training to include safety training, then at that point wasn't I pretty much cleared to, so I don't see why there should be an age restriction beyond the age that you're capable of enlisting. I'm not saying you have to enlist, but you can enlist at 17 with your parents' permission if you have completed all of your high school credits. So, and you can enlist at 18 without their permission if you've completed high school. And from time to time, they take away the high school restriction there. So I don't see why that can't just be the simple basis. If you're trusted to defend your country with some of the most powerful handheld weapons in the world that the government is supplying for free, then why can't somebody purchase, possess, et cetera, under that age? I think maybe it makes logical sense to be under a parent's guidance. My children have guns, but they're in my house, and I have the combinations to the safe. When they move out, they can have them. It's as simple as that.
You know, it's a little crazy to me that I remember talking to some people that are older than I am, and they would say that 18 was the age for drinking, and then 21 became the age for drinking. And we've discovered in our a relatively recent president that we've had that 26 is now the age when you have to have your own health insurance. Some of this stuff really seems to be delaying the age of responsibility. And if 18 is the age of responsibility, so you can vote and purchase tobacco, and then 21 is the age to have to be able to buy alcohol or to buy handguns. I mean, I don't know. I bought a 20 gauge shotgun for my son when he turned 12, and when he turned 15, he got his firearms identification license, and I transferred the shotgun to him. At the beginning of all of this COVID nonsense, I took my 17-year-old daughter out, and I said, "We're going to buy you a shotgun, and it's going to be yours." With the nonsense that we have here in Massachusetts, she couldn't purchase the shotgun and have it be under her name. I was able to buy it and then transfer it to her, which was totally legal. There certainly is an age, but we also all know people and people that have kids that are 18 and 19 and 20 years old that are complete screw ups. Should they be able to have a gun? Yes, maybe. Should they have a gun? Maybe not. And this
no, you can't do that, because if you do that, they're going to start picking and choosing who gets what. That same person at 21 can legally buy alcohol, and they've already been old enough to legally buy a car, and they can get drunk and get behind the wheel of that car and T-bone a minivan and kill everybody in that minivan and be more deadly than they were purchasing that firearm. So when you start going, well, this person can have a gun, that person can't, and this can, you've got to make it cut and dry. Otherwise, they will nitpick this, and that's how you end up with these. Well, you can't have a 150-round drum. Well, now you can't have a 30-round mag. Well, now you can't have a 15-round mag. Now you can't have a 10. Now you can't have a 7. So that's the thing that leads up to that. You can't predict what they're going to do. You can't predict what they're going to do.
I'm with you on that, and I have. I was at a friend of mine's earlier this evening. She's got my son's 19, her son's 19. Her son, her son didn't make it out of college, and he's certainly not as mature as my son is. But I don't think he should not have a gun. It's probably not a good decision for him, but I don't think he should not be able to have it if he wants one. I think if he wants one, get one, get the licensing, get some training, and have some responsibility to it.
Yeah, see, and I think that's just a matter of opinion. I mean, you threw in the licensing and training. It doesn't say in the Second Amendment the right to keep and bear arms as long as you got a license and training. I know that's a big point of contention for a lot of people. It's just that feel good. Well, you got this, so you're good to go.
Oh, I
think at a certain point, if the federal government figures out a way to rewrite the Second Amendment, they're going to get everything they want. But that's probably the best way for stuff like that to just be across the board.
If they could figure out a way to rewrite the Second Amendment, they'd write it out of the Bill of Rights, and we'd have a 9 amendment Bill of Rights.
Totally,
we'd just go from 1 to 3.
Totally, and I have to say that one of my biggest concerns about national reciprocity is the federal government coming out and saying, here's what the requirements are, here's what you have to have such and such a score, and you have to be able to shoot at whatever 250 out of 300 points out of a target in order to get a concealed carry permit. I love the idea of being able to travel the country and having a gun to be able to protect yourself. And I know this is stuff we hit on earlier tonight. But I don't want the federal government to say, if you do not have this score, then you do not have this right. And it's the same thing with the age. So I'm with you on that. But I do think there has to be some responsibility with this. You know what I mean?
No, I agree. Travis, you got something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just thought it was kind of interesting. You're talking about the ages to buy firearms. It's interesting. What do we say? 18 for long guns in Nebraska, 21 for handguns, handgun ammo. Yeah, I could take a suitcase full of cash when I'm 16 and go buy any car I want with no background check. Sure, I got to have a license to drive it, but I mean, you're just as likely to die in an automotive crash as a teenager as you are to die by a firearm, whether to be shot by one or shoot yourself or have an accident with one. But we don't regulate what kids do. They get their license, but they can still get that car. They can still end life just as quickly as they could with a firearm. So I think it's ridiculous that we even have those limits at all.
Well, if I could say something, just so again, coming from for these people out there getting into gun owners who think that some of the stuff might sound like common sense, it goes back to the old, you give an inch, you take a mile. If we allow the magazine restrictions, if we allow the age restrictions, okay, so now they're going to say, now you can apply for a license. Now you have to have an aptitude test to see if you can own the gun too. I mean, so I think I kind of agree with Squid. You got to make it cut and dry. You can't give it on this because they're just going to keep coming and coming and coming and coming.
Well, and again, name another right that you have to have a license in order to exercise that right. There's no free speech license. There's no printing press license. There's no license. There's no license that guarantees me freedom from illegal search and seizure. I don't have to have a special sticker on my license plate to say the cops can't search my car without a warrant or without my consent. It just is. So why do I have to have a license to exercise my Second Amendment rights? Again, it's been relegated to a second class right, and it's not. It was never intended to be, or it wouldn't be in the Bill of Rights. Those first 10 amendments were ratified because the founding fathers realized that the Constitution, great as it is, forgot some things, and they learned as they went, and they put those things in as soon as they realized that it was lacking some things. And they included that for a reason. Because the Constitution does not limit the people. The Constitution limits the government. But a lot of people have lost sight of that. And I don't believe in licensing a right. I just don't see how it's okay to license any right. Not when we have a document that says you have these rights because you're an American and you breathe air.
I think the fact that we tolerate it shows that we're willing to be law abiding and all this other stuff. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with it, but we all have gone through all the garbage to get our concealed pistol license, or gone through the garbage of filling out the 4473, or gone through the garbage of registering if we have to do that, or gone through whatever it is. We've all done the things that we got to do to comply. And I mean, if that doesn't show that we're the good guys, I don't know what else does. It's always said the bad guys.
Right.
The bad guys are going to do. You can take away everything. You can make it illegal. You can do it. The whole reason they're bad guys is because they do illegal things. And the people who think that we're crazy because we believe in this right don't look at it any differently, and they don't see the difference, and they it just doesn't add up to them. They don't get the fact that you could make guns illegal. You could erase the Second Amendment, and the bad guys are still going to have guns. And even if you went door to door and took every single gun, you could still make guns. And even if you found a way to take away, then they would just use fire or sticks or knives or cars or planes or poison gas, or the list goes on and on. So, I mean, according to my governor, COVID-19 kills more people than guns or whatever. But the whole thing is, it's it's a never-ending battle. So we comply with what we have to comply so we can get our concealed carry permit, or so we can go buy the gun from the FFL or whatever it is. We comply with what just to get by, to just, and we keep fighting the battle. I think it's important not just to get some people to try to understand, but for them to see why we fight so passionately for it. I'm not saying twist their arm and turn them into a gun rights activist, but if they decide, you know what, I get it now, I want to be a part of this, that's the point where I'm going to say welcome. Until then, you're the same old, same old.
All right. Okay, so I've got one last. Well, you know what? It's probably time to call it. It's almost 11 o'clock here, so that means it's knocking on midnight for some of you folks. But a couple things that we didn't get to tonight, and maybe we can cover some of these. Squib gave me a great idea actually before we went live. Here in weeks to come, before too much longer, we're going to talk about what did you say, Squib? Like misconceptions, I think is how you worded it.
Seem to think that, for example, in my state, you can open carry. And from time to time, I'll talk to somebody and they'll say, why do you have that gun? And it's like, did you know that it's legal to open carry on public streets? And no, I had no idea. Stuff like that. You
know what? That may be coming up here in a couple of weeks.
Well, I was going to say, you could also include the whole, if they break into your house and they're running away, shoot them and drag them back in. That's a misconception too. Or the time somebody said to me, oh, well,
right,
my cousin's got a concealed pistol license, so that means he's got a license to kill. It's like, no, that's not what it means. So there's misconceptions either way.
Right. And maybe that's what we'll talk about for the Every Second Matters chat, because we're coming up on June 2nd on a Tuesday, so we will have our regularly scheduled chat that night, but it'll be the Every Second Matters edition, and maybe we can talk about some of these misconceptions on that night. Things like, Squib, you said when you were in Nebraska hanging out with Travis, you didn't realize that it was cool in Nebraska just to throw a loaded rifle in the back seat of the vehicle and just drive down the road, drive from the range back to the house with it that way. As long as it's not a shotgun, that's okay in our state. So, but not every state's like that. So a few other misconceptions that we'll get into that night are things like, depending on where you live, it's totally okay to open carry. You don't need a permit to open carry in the state of Nebraska. And these vary from state to state, so we can only speak for the states that we live in or that we know for sure the laws. But you can totally open carry in Nebraska without a permit, unless you're in Omaha, that's different. But you can buy a machine gun. As an American, you have the right to own a machine gun, and a lot of people don't realize that. It's a little more expensive. The gun's a lot more expensive. The paperwork and the licensing process gets a little more expensive, and those do have to be registered, but it's legal to do so. Suppressors in 30 some odd states now are legal to own and put on your firearm. So, I mean, we'll cover all those misconceptions and more, so be sure and tune in. I will let people know when that's coming up, but we're going to go ahead and wrap things up because it's getting late, and we've had a few people that already were getting sleepy and had to bail on us. So we're going to give everybody a chance to just say goodnight, wrap things up, anything you want to end with, and then anything coming up on your channel if you do things on your channel. So we'll just go kind of back in reverse order here. We'll start with Gizzard Gary.
Yo!
You still with us, right? You're not asleep.
I am still with you. Absolutely. That's been an interesting show. Just too bad. Well, I really haven't had much of a chance to interject because I'm not affected by too many of these restrictions. But
no kidding.
There are a few. I mean, there are a few improvements we could have, but that's neither here nor there. So anyway, thanks for having me. Check out Foul Territory on Friday nights and Early Bird Chat on Sunday mornings.
There you go. Give him the bird.
Give him the bird.
Mr. Jim Burgess, you're up next.
Hi guys, thanks for the invite. I'm kind of like Gary. I didn't have much to say about infringements that don't really exist in my state, but it was good listening to you guys. And
Now again, too. I mean, some of these laws that are proposed federally, they'll exist in all 50 states. So
this is true.
They do affect all of us, not just some. If it's a federal law,
and
so in that case, we're all going to have a dog in that fight.
Oh yeah, and as far as I'm concerned, we do with some of these other states too, because you see states start to copy and paste things like red flag laws.
Well, and especially where you live, Jim, because what's the old saying? As goes Texas, so goes the nation.
Oh yeah.
So I've heard that many times. So I mean, if Texas is okay with certain things happening, then a lot more states will be okay with such a thing too.
Yeah, we also say don't California my Texas.
I say that here, don't California my Nebraska.
Yeah, don't put those signs for Texas up on Nebraska either on our borders. Don't think about going there. I've been seeing that happening lately up in Oklahoma.
Nebraska's not for everyone, and we'd like to keep it that way.
Exactly.
All right, Travis, you're up next.
Yeah, guys, make sure you check out my podcast called Caliber Corner on Monday nights at 6 o'clock Central Time. We talk guns and ammo. Otherwise, check out my YouTube channel, Travis P11. Check out everybody on the panel tonight. They got great content on their channels. And thank you for the invite, man. I appreciate it. Good talk.
You betcha. Pat, thanks for jumping in here.
Thanks for having me on. And I just wanted to plug Travis P11's podcast on Monday nights, and thanks for Defense Dad and everybody else coming on tonight, and thanks for having me on. It was a really good discussion and definitely a back to basics conversation. Loved it.
You bet, and thanks for being here. All right, Obnoxious One, we were glad to have you with us again.
Oh, it's my turn now?
Yeah, go ahead.
When did that happen?
Just now. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Hi. Check out my channel.
Hi.
I did Colt Python video last week.
I gotta watch that one yet.
Dropped that. And we did a Kimber K6S target video that I dropped today. So 2 revolvers. And I actually picked up an Uberti Kettleman today.
Ooh. You know you're supposed to drop those videos on Wheel Gun Wednesdays, right?
Yeah, I know. You kind of have to get the Colt out as soon as you can. The Python, you just have to. It's actually when they hand you the Python, they say if you're going to do a video on this, you have to get it out as soon as possible.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Totally makes sense. I get it.
Yep.
If I had a Colt Python, I would definitely be getting that thing out as often as possible and getting it on the range too. So I hear you. All righty.
I did those, and I think I've got a couple more of the SARs I have to do, and
I'm not on Instagram, but those of you on what is it called, the Gram? Is that how you're supposed to say it?
The Insta.
On the Insta, go check out Obnoxious One, because this guy shoots the coolest pictures and puts them up on there of firearms in the backyard. And dude, I just kind of want to live in your backyard because that looks awesome. So just wanted to throw that in there.
I want to borrow that waterfall.
No kidding. Yeah. Let's take that to Nebraska. We've got a couple of waterfalls naturally in here. We've contrary to what people think, we've got hills, we've got waterfalls.
Mm-hmm.
Come check it out, but don't stay. All right, Charlie, riding shotgun with Charlie. Thanks for being here again, pal.
Thanks for having me, man. I was excited to get the message from you earlier this week when you said it was going to be talking about ridiculous gun laws. I knew that I needed to chime in, and I would have plenty to talk about.
I kind of thought that you would feel that way.
Oh, my God. So if people want to check out my show, it is called Riding Shotgun with Charlie. It's on YouTube. It's on Gunstreamer. It's in podcast form on all the podcast outlets. This past weekend, I actually interviewed someone up in Wells River, Vermont, which is way the hell up there in Vermont. And I've got some personal business that I need to do in the Midwest this week, and I think there's a possibility I'm going to interview someone in Indiana and have that out for my first show in next month, which is June. So I put out shows on the 2nd and 4th, Riding Shotgun with Charlie. That's what I call it. That's where you can find me. Thank you.
You bet. Thanks for being here. And just so you know, I mean, once you're in Indiana, I mean, you're over halfway to Nebraska. So if you wanted to just come hang out, dude.
So I actually, while we were talking tonight, I'm like, okay, how far is Omaha from the hometown of where I grew up in? And it's only, I don't know, 7.5 short hours.
That's in Nebraska. I mean, in Texas, everything's 7.5 hours. In Nebraska, everything's 4 to 5 hours apart. So, but we're still used to that. Just to get anywhere, if you don't drive 100 miles, you haven't really gone anywhere in Nebraska. So, I get it.
All of New England, I grew up in Illinois. All of New England is the size of Illinois.
Yeah, right.
So I drove 3 hours this weekend to do a show, and I was talking with a guy in New Jersey on Saturday evening, messaging him, and I'm like, 3 hours, the gun for hire range is only about 3 hours, and I'm like, 3 hours to Vermont doesn't seem bad, but 3 hours down to New Jersey seems like forever.
Well, that's because there's so much of that time you've got to go like 30 miles an hour in a traffic jam.
I found this way. If I take the Newburgh Bridge from which is, I don't know, a half hour north of New York City, then I can avoid going through New York City. But you still have to drive a little out of the way to avoid having to spend even more time and $20 on the George Washington Bridge.
Well, I mean, you go 3.5 hours and you're in northern Vermont, but you go 3.5 hours in New Jersey and you've gone like 2 blocks. So
right,
I get it. I mean, I understand.
It's still North Jersey.
Well, thanks for being here. And just, for the record, I know that we don't have the biggest county in Nebraska. The biggest county in Nebraska is not the biggest in the nation, but we have a county. Our biggest county here is roughly the size of Rhode Island. So that's what I've always been told, is that they're pretty close in area to each other. So, just that puts that state into perspective for me. And that's where I grew up. If I go west across the county line, I'm in the state's largest county. And apparently that booger is about the size of the state of Rhode Island. So I get it. You can about spit across that state. Anyway, thanks for being here, Charlie. Next up, we've got Defense Dad.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me tonight. It was a fun chat. Hopefully I didn't go on too long on a diatribe there, but I have this kind of personality. If someone asks me my opinion, I tend to give it to them.
We wouldn't ask if we didn't want you to tell it.
So, I've got channel Defense Dad. It's a smaller channel. Hopefully you guys check it out. I got some new videos coming out. We shot the raw footage today, and Defense Daughter made her shooting debut today, shooting her Taurus TX-22. So I got a video coming out on that today.
What do you think of that? That's a sweet shooting little pistol, isn't it?
It is. It was a lot of fun. There was a family out there, the other kids shooting 22s, and we had 2 or 3 good hours out there. So check it out when I get it posted.
Good deal. We'll look forward to seeing that. All right. Last but certainly not least on the panel, we've got Squibload.
Almost fell asleep there. What? Thanks for the invite.
That says Defense Dad was boring.
Thanks for the invite, and it was a pretty good topic. So hopefully somebody out there got something out of this, and we'll do some more, right?
Absolutely. And I tell you what, those of you that are out there in the live chat, thanks for keeping things lively. I see it kind of turned into a little bit of an abortion discussion, and I put a few comments in there, but that's not what we're talking about tonight. But thanks for keeping things lively out in the live chat. But those of you that are listening to this on replay or watching it on replay, we want to know your thoughts on some of these laws, how they've affected you, what state you're in. So go ahead and make comments. And if you're out in the live chat, but you want to drop a comment after this video renders, and you can just drop the comments down below the video, go ahead and do that too. If you would, come on back to it and drop those comments, because we really want to know how people get affected by these laws. And I should have thrown this out at the beginning of the chat. I'm looking at this panel. We don't have anybody on this panel that is a full-time gun industry worker. We've got a panel, and even the people out in the chat for the most part are regular people, the gun owners that I associate with week in and week out online and within my own personal life. They're regular people. We've got school teachers, more than one school teacher in this panel. We've got farmers and ranchers. We've got retail salesmen. We've got some of you, I don't even know for sure what you do for a living. We've got factory workers. We've got somebody, Patricia works part-time at a gun range, but she works full-time contracting on the Air Force Base. That she's, we're not gun people per se, as in we're all, we don't work for Guns and Ammo magazine. We don't work in a gun store. We don't work in a gun factory. We're regular people who love our freedoms and love being able to own guns and use these tools for many different purposes, everything that they're legally able to be used for. So if you're new to the gun owning community, you're not on the outside. You're one of us, and you're just a regular person who bought a firearm. We all are regular people who bought a firearm. Most of us kind of, guns are kind of like tattoos. Once you get one, you just want one more, and then one more, and then one more. And I mean, that's kind of how it is, but we're regular people. And that's what I like about the people that I have on my panel is we've got a bunch of regular guys and gals who all happen to come together, and we all agree, at least on the gun ownership part. We don't always agree on everything else, and that's fine. That's totally cool. I just love having everybody here. So I want to know how you regular folks get affected by these gun laws out there in the comments after this renders. Those of you out in the chat, thank you for dropping the comments so that we can see you, because we've got the list, so we will tell you hello. We had Kingpin, Aaron Mortensen, Calaveras 32 Special, Defense Dad, Fluffy 10mm Jeep Guy, Squiblift, Carolina EDC Reviews, Obnoxious One, Gizzard Gary, Squibload, Jim Burgess, Blitz, Travis P11, Keith Gregory, Banging Gongs with Your Moms, Rich White, Blue Steel 44, Emily L., 10X Shooters, Mystic Guns, Gun Loving Grandpa, Armament and Axes, and I saw that super chat. Thank you, AA. We appreciate it. We love you. New York Outcast, G23, Zone Fighter 1, Agorizer, Patricia Harold, It Was Like Emptiness, Patriot in the Dark, Dangerous Freedom, Foose, Kevin the Tack Daddy, Darcy Sorensen, Alaskan Ballistics. I saw you out there, but I didn't get a chance to say hi. C4 Defense, Net Flutter, Ozzy Osbourne, Mike, Guy That Comments, Vash Matrix, Idaho Rogers, USMC, and Justin Gibbons. So that's a long list again.
Not bad,
Love it
man.
when we have a long list. Thank you, all of you, for being here. And again, watching this. We don't have a chat if it isn't for you. There's no need to do this if nobody watches it. We can just as well get together on a Zoom meeting then and just talk about this amongst ourselves. So the fact that you are all out there watching, listening, commenting, sharing, liking, subscribing, please do all of that stuff. That's why we do this, and that's why we so appreciate all of you that help with that support. So on behalf of, let me see, who did I lose? We lost Patricia. We lost Calaveras 32 Special. Who else did we lose out of the panel? That might be it for now. Do we have? Oh, and we lost Duke Liberty early on. But on behalf of those three, on behalf of Gizzard Gary, Jim Burgess, Travis P11, Pat Hirsch, Obnoxious One, Riding Shotgun with Charlie, Defense Dad, Squibload, on behalf of Sandhills Sweetheart and myself, we love you. Thank you for being here. Join us next Tuesday night at the same time, 9 o'clock Central Time, the only time zone that matters. And in the meantime, get off my lawn.